Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto was the Green Ranger and got harem? Huge shout out to Otsutsuki no Yami for this story. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Prologue. Dark clouds gather together above a valley, casting a dark deep shadow over the two statues that stand across each other. These statues were made by the civilians and shinobi of Konohagakure, the first hidden village of the elemental nations, who was founded by Uchiha Madara and Senju Hashirama. Standing at the feet of the statue on the right is a tall, young man with blonde wild hair. His eyes, which consist out of two blue eyes, which made the blue hope pale in comparison. This shinobi name is Naruto. How you are now wounded at my feet and not me at yours, Uchiha Sasuke. The shinobi replied emotionlessly to the other young man who laid at the feet of his ancestor. Blood gushing out of the Uchiha's wounds that trailed down to the river next to him. It's what we call deceptions. Something that comes with our job as shinobi, however, you could only think about revenge. First did your brother, who unknown to us at the time was on a deep cover mission to infiltrate an organization for our village, and then your hatred was shifted to Konoha, which you destroyed. I must say, a well done job. Sasuke gurgled up some blood when he tried to laugh. Ha ha ha. Ha, you're mad. Never thought to hear from you that I killed your friends. Tenteuea. The downed Uchiha suddenly cried out in agony when a kunai buried itself in his right eye. I did not care about those biased civilians, nor did I care about those shinobi who tortured me in my youth and whispered behind my back. But when her name left your lips, I stole one of your eyes. She, Tenten, was a woman who was a proud, strong kunoichi, and you have no right of speaking out her name. Snarled the blonde young man. Rage, hatred, and disgust quickly replaced his beautiful sapphire blue eyes, and it turned a deep crimson color. You murdered her. Taking my Tenten away from me just like the villagers took away my childhood. I've enough of being used, and to tell you a secret, I never intended of becoming the Hokage of those backstabbers. I will leave Konoha, yet before I leave. The shinobi bent down and picked up the katana that belongs to the Uchiha. Tightened his fingers on the handle and gazing coldly down upon the Uchiha. My revenge for Tenten. The Kusanada came down and pierced Sasuke's remaining eye, which caused the Uchiha scream out in agony. Tell your wretched clan how they can burn in hell. And with a second movement of his sword arm and a deadly arch of the sword, Sasuke's head was separated from his body and flew through the air and landed in the water and quickly sunk down to the bottom. Kaiten. Walking away while doing a chain of hand signs as his back was lighted up by the blue fire that devoured the Uchiha's corpse. A ripple appeared in front of him, and the young shinobi, Naruto Uzumaki, who wears his mother maiden name and honor, vanished from the elemental nations. If the young Uzumaki had stayed longer, he would have seen his sensei only in name arrive at the scene. The pupil of the late Yondaime Hokage lone eye widened at the sight of his rogue student. This man's name is Hot Aki Kakashi, last surviving member of Team 7, which was led by the Yondaime, who was the late father of his other student who is nowhere in sight. Flashing through hand signs, and part of the river came to life, and a dragon rose up high into the air before crashing down on the burning corpse. Upon contact with the Uchiha's corpse, the fire died out, however, much to the more veteran shinobi's shock, the body of his late student fell apart in ashes which mixed with the water and was dragged along the river until nothing was left of Uchiha Sasuke's body. It never came to his thought that the head was missing, so heavy was his depression on his soul and mind. In another plane of existence far away from that of the elemental nations and on an entirely new world, a shimmering in the air slowly came into existence. It was a portal, and more exactly it was the same that was used by one Uzumaki Naruto. Hands were the first that came out of the portal and grasped the edge of the portal. The feet followed and then the rest of his body. His clothes were in tatters, ripped and barely resembled clothes, while his skin was burned and cut in several places, yet they quickly healed. Stumbling forward and falling to his knees, Naruto tilted his head to look at his surroundings. This doesn't look like the elemental nations, and that means that my jutsu did work. Finally free from those who tried to control my life or ending it. His eyes took in the large stone buildings that were so high that it almost touched the clouds that were standing in the distance. Hey Bob, did you hear something there in that alley? A voice cut through the night, and the blonde shinobi just noticed that it was indeed late in the evening. Quickly the shinobi pressed himself flat against the wall when a shadow crept over the ground. Glancing around him and seeing that he actually appeared in a dead alley, Naruto concentrated, and a burst of chakra gave him the strength to jump up into the air and latched himself against the wall. No, Rick hasn't heard a sound. You sure it wasn't just a cat? The man who was called Bob by his friend replied. Does a cat make this? Indicated Bob, who pointed out to the scorch marks the portal made when it appeared in this existence. Crouching low to study the marks, Bob nor Rick noticed the shadow above them drop silently behind them and knocked out Rick with a chop to his neck, and a second later Bob joined him. Shaking his head, Naruto crouched next to the man called Bob and placed a hand on his forehead. Chakra surged through his arm and into his hand that was connected to the man, and within seconds the shinobi skimmed through the man's memories. This place is called New York and is in the United States, one of the largest continent of the planet Earth. Their main languages are English and they have a library. That is good news if I think that the library is the same as in my home country with a load of information. Now let's see where it is located. Smirking, the young man straightened himself and left the alley and used a hinge to cast an illusion as if he wears clothes. Walking with a calm pace, the shinobi moved through the streets of New York in search of the library. New York Public Library. Landing in a crouch silently, the blonde shinobi took in the library and was amazed at how large it is. Molding his chakra and making a cross-hand sign, and several clones appeared around him. We got a basis of this continent language, and this library is a treasure of knowledge. Search for everything that could help us survive in this world, which means its security equipment. Knowledge of how things here work in the currency, etc. Now go. It was 4 hours later than the first batch of information entered his mind. Frowning, the shinobi slowly glanced around him with a thoughtful expression. Searching for something and his eyes roaming the wall and the ceiling until he noticed it. Small objects which are called cameras who records what happens in the building. Moving through the building and to the control room that the clone had informed him when he dispelled. Arriving in the room, the shinobi quickly removed the records of the time when he arrived here and dispelled his clones before leaving the building. Angel Grove, a year later. Tilting his head a little up, a pair of blue eyes took in the nameplates in front of him, reading the name of the school. Angel Grove High School. The young man standing in front of the school building is Naruto, who had decided to lay low in a small town, and his age brought him to this school. He had changed his wardrobe and now wears blue jeans with matching sneakers, a tight shirt that hugs his upper body firmly and showed a well-trained body, and a blue jacket over it. A shoulder bag hangs over his right shoulder. As for his hair, it is still blonde and equally spiky, but now more in the style of his late father. Well, time to start official a new chapter in my life. Though the young man, pulling his bag a little bit higher on his shoulder and stepped forward. Hey, Kimberly, kiss her. A fat voice sounds from behind him. Curiously, Naruto turns around to see a girl with dark shoulder-length hair and a pair of dark eyes. She wears a Bordeaux red shirt with over a black leather jacket and tight dark blue jeans. One and all, this girl looks very pretty. However, the two boys behind her were everything except handsome. One of them was a tall, thin boy who seems to break with the slightest touch of his more than an overweight friend. A frown appeared on the girl's face, whose name he just learned. Kimberly did not appreciate the attention these two gave her. Naruto's eyes narrowed when he noticed that the taller and fatter of the two face morphed in one of cruelty. The fat young man grasped firmly the girl's wrist and pulled her towards him. Tut tut tut, Kimberly. Is that how you speak to your best friends? Keep your hands off me, Bulk. Growled Kimberly as she leaned back to avoid the stench that is his breath. Taking a step back and moving her wrist in the hope to release herself from the fat person. Release me. Release me, you fat oaf. She screamed, which had an opposite effect on Bulk. Bulk's face turned first a shade of red, which was quickly followed by an ugly shade of purple, which quite scared Kimberly and the other students who watched this confrontation. Raising his right hand, Bulk snarled. I'm not fat. This is all muscle and you will speak to me with respect. Bulk roared and his hand descended towards Kimberly. As for her, Kimberly closed her eyes and expected pain, however, it never came, and an unfamiliar voice sounds next to her. Naruto had moved quickly when he noticed the cruel look in Bulk's eyes. With a few firm steps, the shinobi in hiding had appeared next to the girl and caught the wrist of the young man. That's enough. It is clear to me that you harassed this girl against her will. Stalking her and forcing her to accept your affection doesn't help in the least, punk. Release her and stay out of her way, or else I will deal with you myself. The last part Naruto coldly whispered to Bulk, who only narrowed his eyes at him and then released the girl's wrist. Watching the boy spew spit at his feet before leaving until he was out of sight, Naruto turned around to the girl. In a much kinder voice, he spoke to her. Are you alright? Thanks, said Kimberly in gratitude for his help. She had seen other students gathering around them, yet none of them offered any support. But you know, I could handle them myself. Here she crossed her arms over her bust, which showed that they weren't that small at all. Naruto lips curled up in a pleasant smile. Of course you could handle them, but we would not want trouble so early in the morning. See you later, tough girl. Here Naruto lifted his hand up in a gesture those used for goodbye and stepped into the crowd of students and disappeared from her sight. A few minutes later, the newest student of Angel Grove High School found himself in the director's office. The director was a tall man with a bulky stomach. I noticed that there was quite a disturbance this early in the morning, care to explain, young man? Of course, sir. This early in the morning when I arrived at the entrance of the school, I caught the sound of someone being harassed. Turning around I noticed a girl who was ganged up by two other boys, one slim and tall while the other was quite bulky. She turned them away which they did not accept and the latest one grasped her grip until I intervened. He told the director who shook his head at the story. What will happen to them? Lowering himself into his comfy chair before addressing the new student. That is my problem Mr. Uzumaki, now as for you. It came to my attention that you are an orphan and have a large amount of knowledge about several branches which I'm curious too. I taught myself about software engineer, data scientist, and information security beepus that I learned through the web and earned several certificates in these branches, Naruto told the director of what his talents consist of. I've followed the news and the growth of modern technology and my hunch told me that in that specific branch laid my future. Grasping his laptop bag and pulling out some certificates. These are my certificates and recommends from diverse companies that I had helped with their programs and tested also the security programs of them. He hands over the papers which the director took and read. There was a moment of silence while the director read through the papers until he placed them down on his desk. Glancing up at the young man across of him the director spoke with an incredulous voice. These are really astounding feats and from someone your age is just I might say, Mr. Uzumaki, you're a bit overqualified for this fine institution. Are you sure you want to enter my school? 100% positive, director. Sometimes you need fresh air to come up with some new ideas. And this, Angel Groves High School is the best place for me right now. A small place, peaceful without the hectic life that normal people have in the large cities. Replied the Uzumaki while accepting back his papers. Thank you for this conversation director and if you ever need someone to look at your computer, don't hesitate to call. The blonde smiled and then left the office to start his day by searching for his first class. Moving around while avoiding the large crowds of students Naruto walked through the corridors in search for his first class. Class B1 205 Class B1 207 Class B1 20 mused the young man while reading the class signs that stuck above each door. According to the numbers, I would soon arrive at my class a number. B1 209 is our class, nice to meet you. Naruto blinked when a slightly familiar voice sounds from behind him. Turning around to see who had addressed him, Naruto was slightly surprised to see the girl that he had helped this morning with her stalker problem standing behind him. From the way you retreated quickly and moved to the direction of the director's office, I can only assume that you're the new guy in town. My name is Kimberly Hart, tough guy. Her lips formed in a pleasant smile when she introduced herself. Uzumaki, Naruto Uzumaki, a pleasure, he introduced in a James Bond way which earned him a giggle from the girl. I take it that we share the same class. Kimberly nodded firmly. We do, she confirmed. Come on, the teacher does not like if we come too late into class, especially Mr. Burke. Here she pulled out her tongue at him and then led him towards their first class of the day. Following her to class B1 to 209 and stepped through the class entrance. And who might you be? The question was stated by the teacher to the blonde new student of Angel Grove High School. Shrugging his shoulders and silently hand over the strip of paper that the director had given him. A new student. Is your name Uzumaki? That is not a name that is commonly used here in the States. It is not from the States, my name origin comes from Japan, Naruto informed his new teacher. If that was all, Professor. How is this class sorted, might I just choose a seat of my own or do you appoint me to one? Sit wherever you want, Mr. Uzumaki. The only thing that I want from you is that you do not cause any problems while being here on this fine institution, am I understood? Naruto's lips curled up in a Cheshire-like smile. Slowly turning around the young blonde man responded. There won't be any problem happen that comes from me, Mr. Burke. The blonde new student replied with amusement now clear in his voice. Walking down the lane of desks until he stopped at the one next to the girl who had led him to this room. Hello Kimberly, do you mind if I claim the seat next to you? The girl who had led him to their shared class had moved to her place when Naruto handed over the slip of paper to the teacher. Now, standing next to her desk is the blonde boy who has asked to sit next to her. Smiling brightly at him, Kimberly patted the desk next to her indicating to him to take his seat. Not at all my hero. Here she winked at him before she burst out in laughter while Naruto slid into a chair next to her. The following days Naruto's life felt in a comfortable routine. Whistling on the beat of the song That Girl from Tim McGraw while driving his Camaro green car to his friend's house to pick her up. Pushing down the brake and coming to a stop, Naruto whistled loudly to get the attention of his beautiful friend Kimberly, who was sitting on the stairs that led up to her house. Hey, ready to go girl? Kimberly Hart grew a smile when she heard the voice of her friend. She pushed herself off of the stair and moved to the green Camaro. Today she wears a white dress which hugs her curves nicely and a straw hat to protect herself from the sun. Ready and set. Where would you take me with this nice car? Where do you want to go? Naruto playfully retorted while leaning forward and pushed the door open for her. A second later his friend was seated next to him and she answered him. There is a small river not far from Mystic Fall, and it is close to the abandoned mines, Kimberly told her friend who brought the engine of his car to life. And within a few seconds, the car sped off the road and to their swimming destination. Angel Grove Mines. That is a long way down, a tall blonde young man called out. He was leaning slightly over the edge of the cliff and glanced at the calm river below him. Yet, this place looks very peaceful and full of nature. The trees here smells nice, and I noticed that there was a small campfire not far from here. Behind him the sounds of his friend shedding her clothes before feeling her presence closing the distance between them. Glad you enjoy the scenery here, Naruto. His friend Kimberly said from behind him, and she took her place next to him. One day I hiked through the mountain and the surrounding forest and found this place. Once you dive down here in the water you can easily climb out of the water, as there is a small path down there below that lead up to the campfire where we have seen on our way up here. She too leaned slightly over the edge to glance down to the water. It was then that she heard the sounds of her friend shedding his clothes, and the young girl could not control her curiosity of how her friend looks like without the layer of clothes. Glancing at him from out of the corner of her eyes, and what she sees made her a bit hot. Grabbing the hem of his shirt, Naruto pulled his clothing up that slowly showed the girl behind him a strong muscular back, broad shoulders until the shirt came off completely. Flexing unconsciously his broad shoulders before removing his shoes and jeans before revealing that he wears only boxers. Ready, Kimberly? Everything alright with you? Well, you are spacing out a little. Laughing quietly, Kimberly shook her head a little. Who is last in the water? Take the other out for a dinner. She called out a second before she dived off the cliff and vanished below the water surface and leaving a flabbergasted Naruto behind. Kimberly. You cheater. Naruto yelled loudly before diving and following the girl into the water. Once the blonde young man disappeared under the water surface, Kimberly looks around her in search for the boy. When her friend did not resurface, Kimberly started to get worried and started to call out his name when suddenly something grasped her ankles underwater and pulled her down. Gasp! Ha! I got you, girl. Cried Naruto with a laugh when he resurfaced. A second gasp and Kimberly resurfaced and her eyes searched for her friend. Once they landed on him, her eyes narrowed. Oh, you. Come here and I will drown you. Hitting the water and moving quickly to her blonde friend, she managed to wrap her long slim legs around his neck and took a seat on his broad shoulders and tried to drown him by using her weight, but much to her surprise her friend just stayed afloat. Ah! She cried out when Naruto pushed her legs up and she lost her balance and landed with a splash in the water. Laughter filled the clearing when the sounds of Kimberly cries of surprise graced his ears. Whirling around in the water to see his best friend sputter water out of her mouth, which caused his lips to stretch out into a Cheshire grin. Kim never ever messes with a fox, Naruto smugly voiced out only to get a wave of water into his face and in his mouth. I mess with a fox and you can't make me stop. Kimberly cried out cheerfully and pushed a new wave of water to her friend who retaliated with a wave of his own. The two young adults splashed each other and enjoyed the water, while a certain former football star gazed with eyes that shone a great dislike for the blonde young man. Jason Scott, football star of Angel Grove High, or currently the former football star of Angel Grove High. The young man had decided to prank the school, only to fail horribly at it. His prank was to smuggle a cow into the gymnasium as the mascot for his football team. However, the owner of the cow quickly discovered the loss of his animal and had called the cops to retrieve his cow from the thieves. A long story short, Jason was discovered and was chased through Angel Grove with a classic car chase until a truck crashed into his car and ruined his career and social life. However, the worst thing was, or still is, that the day after a successful prank, Jason would ask his secret crush on a date, but it seems that someone stole that chance away from him. Eyes narrowing at the pair, Jason could only quietly growl from low of his throat. The young man could not fathom that such a beautiful smile that belongs to the girl he likes looked so good, yet was brought into the world by someone else than him. Who is that newbie that hangs around her? Does he think that by hanging around the queen of Angel Grove that his popularity will start, a seed that will blossom? Clenching his hands into fists, the former football star whirled on his heel and marched away from the pair. Jealousy ruled his emotions. Speed walking down the path that he had taken through the forest, Jason made his way back to Billy, who seems a genius in technology and was also the same person who had deactivated his ankle cuffs. Reaching the edge of the forest and climbing the slope, which was slightly higher than the mines below him, which gave him an excellent view. The mines are abandoned for a few years now because they had exhausted the source, yet his new acquaintance had decided to keep searching. Sliding down the slope and crossing the small distance between him and Billy. Hey Billy, what are you doing? He shouted out to the other young male. Connecting the detonator to the explosives. Alright, that would do it. Step back, Jason, Billy said. The dark-skinned youth slowly moved back towards the detonator that was placed a few feet back. Watch, Billy called out and then pushed down the detonator, and they waited when nothing happened. Jason arched a brow at his companion. You sure that you did connect them right? Let me check the cables, and true to his words, Billy checked the detonator for any error and found the cause, reconnecting the cables however, now that the safe is off of the detonator. The explosives activated instantly and an explosion happened that blew Billy and Jason off their feet and they roughly crashed against a slope and their mind blackened out. While Jason made his way back to Billy, Naruto and Kimberly were laughing and she was now held in a warm firm embrace of her friend. Her small back against his broad firm chest and Kimberly could not help the blood that rushed towards her face. Naruto, can you tell me something more about yourself? Maybe you can tell me a story about your birthplace or how you look so yummy. She turns around in his embrace and glared at him playfully and tapped his firm chest. And what, Mr. Uzumaki brought you to Angel Grove? Wait. I know your reason, you wanted to meet me. She haughtily said before holding her breath and then burst out in laughter. Geese, was the short reply of the young man in front of her. She arched an eyebrow at the simple answer and Kimberly did not believe a word of it, at least not all of his. A change of scenery and running away from the worst plague in the world, no the universe. Her friend exclaimed and she noticed a small sliver of fear in his voice. She placed her hands on his shoulder to keep herself afloat. What is this plague you just mentioned, Naru? Said Kimberly and unconscious had pressed her firm shapely breasts firmly against his chiseled chest. Fangirls? Exclaimed the young man and a cold gleam was visible in his eyes. You think that fanboys like Bulker Sticky are a nightmare, then you have never met a fangirl. I am 100% positive that those are the worst thing in the universe. Kimberly shook her head slowly at the words of her friend. The girl did not entirely agree with Naruto, and yet, she could believe how horrible that could have been. But for her, she was surrounded by crazy fanboys. Maybe for you, those girls are a nightmare, but for me, those are those of the opposite gender. However, I protect you from those crazy bitches if you protect me from your lesser kind. She lifted a hand from her friend's shoulder and held up a pinky. A pinky promise, okay. I promise, Naruto sealed it with his own pinky. They shook their hands before releasing each other pinky and it was then that he glanced towards the bottom when the sun rays reflected from something at the bottom of the river. Have you ever dived to the bottom of the river? Shaking her head, Kimberly responded negatively at her friend's question. Arching a lone eyebrow in question at which her friend responded. When I glanced down to the bottom of the river I thought that I saw something gleam in the light of the sun. I was wondering if you want to venture with me to the bottom of the river to find out what exactly caused reflect the surface. It could be a beer bottle, Naruto. It is not strange that people throw bottles or other junks into nature and rivers. She said while also glancing towards the bottom in search of what had captured her friend's attention. Her lips suddenly curled up in a smirk when she saw her chance to get her friend flustered. Or was it something else that got your attention? Wasn't it my two girls that you were ogling, Naruto? Was the intelligent response of Naruto until his eyes lowered to the pair of girls that were confined in her slightly see-through black lacy breast holder. No. Of course, I was not ogling your Aubrey girls. I mean girls. His shouts increased in volume and Kimberly could feel his skin heat up a little more. The clear laugh quickly roused the treetops and she let go of him and vanished from sight when she pushed with her legs against the water to dive towards the bottom of the river. She looks back from over her shoulder to see her friend following her. She stopped and waited for him to lead the way and Kimberly noticed him pointing his index finger at something and then they were on the move again. What did you see when we were at the surface, Naruto? Kimberly thought while following her friend who stopped again and then pointed at the rock slab in front of him. She turned her attention to the object of interest that her friend pointed at and to her utter amazing she could see why he wanted to dive. Oh my, what is that? This isn't something that someone just had thrown in the river as it is easily a few inches in the rock. There embedded in the rock slab is a circular emerald crystal with a tainted golden ring around the jewel. She traces her hand over the crystal and could feel the smooth surface of the rock which resembles dull glass. Kimberly then turns her head to her friend who also traced his finger against the smooth surface only for the jewel to flare up. What was that? The girl wondered when she watches in amazement at how the crystal keeps glowing under his touch. For a second time she reaches out towards the crystal, however, the water suddenly moved wildly and a crack in the rock wall in front of her appeared. Second, later rocks fell around her and fear captured her heart before strong arms wrapped around her and suddenly air reached her lungs when she broke through the water surface. Naruto felt the vibration of an explosion surge through the slab of rock and in one quick movement, he let his chakra surge through his right arm and into his hand and with a little jab, crushed the thin layer of rock and grasped the crystal in his hand before turning to his best friend and wrapped her safely in his arms and launched himself with his strong legs towards the water surface. Gasping for air, Naruto's eyes landed on that of her friend. Are you fine, Kimberly, no wounds or bruises? A concerned blonde asked his friend while checking her for any things he mentioned with his question. I am still in one piece, no wounds or any bruises. But what just happened? Kimberly said and her eyes turned towards the direction of where she knew the mines are. "Come on, Naruto, let's get us out of the water and look for what the cause was." The two young teenagers climbed out of the river and moved towards their clothes. Without drying themselves off, they just put on their clothes, and Naruto was for the umpteenth time reminded that Kimberly is a girl and becoming a beautiful woman. "I think that someone has decided to use the mines in search of some riches," Naruto commented while sticking his head through his shirt and pulled the cloth down to cover his abs. "I suggest we take a quick look and then get out of here, as the cops might soon appear on the scene." Kimberly agreed with him, and the two were soon on the move after she pushed down her own shirt, which covered her clothes-covered breasts. Weaving in and out through the trees and running over small deer paths until they arrived at the edge of the forest. "It's them, Billy and the idiot former star football player," she commented at once when recognizing the two fellow students of Angel Grove High. Billy Cranston, according to the school's rumor mill, his father was once director of this gold mine and was a well-respected man. However, the gold that came from the mines started to dry out and Mr. Cranston was forced to put a halt to his job. Since then, his son, Billy, tried to prove to his father that there is still gold in the mines, and it seems that the rumors are true. "Have you ever seen his father?" Naruto asks while they slid down the slope closest to the pair of unconscious boys. Touching the foot of the slope and hopped over a few rocks and slid down to a stop. Turning his head and sees Kimberly shaking her head negatively. "Do you think that his father, in a desperate attempt of proving that there is still gold in the mines, searched for any gold adder but died in an accident?" Kimberly gave a firm nod. "Yes, I think so. A year ago a huge explosion happened here and a week later Billy did not come to school. Also, there was an article in the newspaper and a victim of the incident under the name of the director. No surname or anything else mentioned, so I think Billy tried to prove that his father's assumption is true and that there is still a source of money if you keep digging." Naruto smiled slightly, and when his feet stopped next to Jason, he nudged with the nose of his shoe against the boy's head. "I can live with what the boy tried to prove, however he endangers others with his actions." A groan quietly reached his ears, and Naruto glanced down to the boys on the ground. Ah, they woke up. "Yo, sleepyheads, what were you two doing here?" Jason's eyes snapped open at the voice of a stranger, yet somewhere it sounds a little bit familiar to him. The next thing he feels was something tapping repeatedly against the side of his head and moved his hand to block the object. "Stop that, Ashol," growled Jason and pushed roughly the object away from his head. Crawling to his feet and attempted to get up but stumbled back and landed on his ass. It was then that Jason noticed who were in his presence. "Kimberly. What are you doing here with him?" As for the girl, she arched a brow at him and folded her arms under her bust. "What do you mean, Mr. Scott, with that statement? We heard an explosion, or rather we were almost buried under rock and stone in the river, and when we searched for the cause we found you and Mr. Cranston here unconscious. As for why you are so familiar with calling out my name, well, I did not give you any permission, is just rude. And for me and Kimberly together, I do not find it necessary to explain it to you. I mean, what does she mean to you? Is she your friend to which she needs to answer to you or something? Not that I know." Naruto started only for Kimberly deny that she knew that boy at all outside of the rumors that are floating around. "It seems you two are no friends, so for what reason needs she to answer for why she is hanging around with me? Now we come to our reason, what were you two doing here?" Jason's eyes narrowed and glared at the blonde-haired youth. His fingers dug into the earth below his hand. "None of your bucine," he started only to be interrupted by someone. "We were digging for a gold adder." The unexpected voice of Billy Cranston joined them, which Kimberly and Naruto locked eyes when their theory was proved right. "I must see if we find any clues of the start for some gold. If my formula is right, then there should one start here and..." Naruto glanced towards a new person that just joined them, and it wasn't much of a surprise to him that the others did not notice the new presence. "Whoa. Dudes, check this out," the new fellow youngster called out. "There is some nifty jewelry here in the rock." His voice gained the attention of the others. Kimberly, Jason, whose jealousy took a backseat and curiosity took its seat, and Billy, who quickly jumped to his feet and staggered towards the rock. They all were watching the newcomer, who has placed his hand on a piece of rock with a black jewel behind it that pulsed a little. "Whoa," it glows, and without a second thought, the black-haired youth bent down and picked out a rock and smashed it against the wall. And much to the astonishment of the others, the rock cracked and the black jewel fell out of the wall and at his feet. "This one is mine, and guys, it feels warm." That looks like the only girl started, only for the crazy black-haired boy to pick up the rock again and smashed it against the wall several times. After a few minutes, 4 more of those jewels fell out of the rock and each rolled to one of them. "Naruto." A new voice interrupted this time, and that sound came from a higher area than them. "What are you 5 doing? Do you know how dangerous it can be for you to stand there and blow things up? Yo, crazy girl, catch." The dark-haired youth picked a jewel from the ground and threw one with a topaz-colored gem towards her, which she caught. "Nice catch," the boy exclaimed while picking up other jewels until each of them had one with the exception of one person. "Sorry dude, there were only 5. But don't worry, you have already a beautiful gem next to you. And here the boy winked to Kimberly, who could not help the rushing of her blood towards her face. Naruto shrugged his shoulders without care. I do not mind at all. For me, it is too flashy and shiny for a person as awesome like me. However, I will not stay here any second longer, as the cops can appear any moment in an area where it is forbidden to set foot. So, see you laters. Wait. Jason shouted and planted a hand on the blonde's shoulder. How can we trust that you will not spill the beans to the cops? I don't even know who you are, and yet you are so familiar with Kimberly. Jason, that is your name, right? Well, I do not care if it is your name or not, but bury it deeply in your mind. My business is none of yours, Snappy. Naruto spoke in a threatening voice, and with cold ice, glacier eyes glared at the slightly younger teenager. Now, if we are done here, Kimberly and I need to go. Wait. Do you hear that? The teenagers all turned their heads in search for a sound when suddenly a loud crack resounded, and the slope in front of them where the gems were buried in came down with a girl on top with it. Everyone move out of the way. Move. Kimberly shrieked while she turned on her heel and ran away from the landslide. Jason and Billy quickly ran away from the rock and found cover behind the rocks a little further away, while the dark-haired young man of Asian descendant managed to find a higher platform that hopefully peeks out over the landslide, while Naruto-trained eyes noticed some rocks that will and stay head and shoulder above the landslide and quickly moved towards the girl that slide down with the earth. Jumping from one rock to another until coming close enough to grasp the girl's hand and with a mighty haul pulled her out of the earth. Everything alright, no bruises or wounds. Little bruises but nothing serious. She managed to say before the sounds of sirens reach her ears. Wait, do you hear that? It sounds like sirens. Everyone attention turned to the fence that is the entrance to these gold mines. We need to move now. She shouted, and that was the start shot for everyone to escape this place. Naruto pulled the girl off her feet and placed her on his shoulder before running towards Kimberly while pushing Chakra to his feet to let him run over the sinkhole. With athletic maneuvers, he closed the distance between them. Run towards the forest to my car and let escape this place. He called out while grabbing Kimberly and threw her over his other shoulder and moved at Olympus athletic speed. Within a few seconds, Naruto and the two girls vanished from the mines and into the shadows of the trees. As for Jason. For the former football star, he moved as quickly as his leg could permit to the car of Billy's mother. Opening the car and throwing himself in the driver's seat and with a roar let the car come to life. Come on, Billy. We need to move. Shouted Jason while whirling the car with a donut maneuver so that the door on the opposite faced Billy, who threw it open and jumped into the car. Grab something tightly because this will be a wild ride from now on. The back wheels whirled madly and a cloud of earth was sent into the air when the car took off and Jason and Billy took off. With a whirl of a second donut, Jason sped away while leaving a trail of disturbed earth behind. The second car chase has started, and how will this end for Jason and Billy? Well, somewhere in the forest a second car, which was camouflaged because of his emerald paint, came with a roar to life, and Naruto with the girls also took off with only one mission. Escaping the police of Angel Grove. It is 7 p.m. in the morning, and this is Angel Grove's morning news. My name is Angelina Johnson, and today the AGCPD has started their investigation of the explosion that has happened last night at Angel Grove's mines. The camera turned and showed the crater and the slope where last night 6 young adults had gathered. The young man who watches the news on his television shook his head slightly while continuing cooking. A concerned civilian had called last night the ACPD for noises that he could hear from the direction of the mines, at which the AGCPD decided to investigate. According to Agent Bell, a group of young adults has gathered there and he quickly called for backup, especially when the already small patrol group has started a chase. Agent Bell. I am wondering if you have found any evidence of who was here last night. Good morning, Madam Johnson. At the moment my colleagues and I are still in full investigating. Last night when we did chase after one of the escapees who has caused a lot of property damage, we were shocked when they managed to escape by speeding past a high-speed train, and they would have escaped harmless if the end of the car did not hit the nose of the train. My man and I needed to wait for the train to pass, but when we arrived at the place the car crashed, all we could find was the remnant of the car and no bodies or clues to who that car belonged. The blonde young man moves through the kitchen, placing down plates and mugs for his guests that he brought with him last night. A second later the ping sound of his rice cooker rang through the kitchen and quickly he placed other plates with fried chicken, some vegetables, and sauce on the table. Good morning, his voice suddenly rang through the kitchen. Good morning, Naruto, came the voice of his friend Kimberly. That looks all very good, I did not know that you could cook. Said the girl while she moved into the kitchen and took a seat at the dining table. On Naruto's face, a small smile appeared and nodded in acknowledgement of the praise that he was given. If you live alone like me, it would surprise you what kind of skills you would learn. Also, it doesn't help to impress my guests with my culinary talents. Tea or coffee? He suddenly asked. Coffee, I think, a lot of coffee, replied Kimberly, and her eyes took in the news. Last night wasn't a dream, right Naruto? She asked after a while and seeing the wreckage of the car that was being used by Billy Cranston and Jason Scott. A quiet laughter filled the room that caused Kimberly and Naruto to look at the entrance of the kitchen to see the crazy girl of last night. If you can call being chased by the AGCPD and somehow manage to rescue those idiots from a wrecked car a dream, then I would not want to know what a nightmare for you is. She said before stepping into the kitchen and took a seat next to Kimberly. And I would like to have coffee too and some answers to my questions. Naruto grabbed a clean cup and placed that in the coffee machine. Pressing down the activating button and then turned around when the machine started to work. Now that the coffee is being prepared, please ask. What were you all doing there? A small smile appeared on the handsome young face of the blonde male. First of all, Kimberly and I arrived just like you when we heard that explosion. We were swimming in the river next to the mines. When the explosion happened, Kimberly and I moved to the place from which the sounds originated and found the two boys there unconscious. And the rest you know. You two were on a date? She asked. Her voice thick with confusion. Isn't that a bit underwhelmed for a date? What? Voiced Kimberly out. Naruto and I were not on a date. He just asked what I would like and I told him one of my places that I like to visit. Her voice rose slightly at the end and her skin flushed a bright pink. She is right, and if it was a date I would have taken a picnic basket with me to finish the day with a bang. Spoke the only male in the kitchen. A sound rang through the kitchen and Naruto turns around to pick up the freshly made coffee which he placed in front of the other girl. Here is your coffee and a question of my own that you might like to answer. What is your name? Trini Kwan, and not a crazy girl like that idiot claims. The now introduced Trini huffed. And what I did there, I always take a walk there because the highest spot on the mines gives a nice view of Angel Grove. Naruto smiled brightly at her. Does it? No, Kimberly, maybe we need to climb the mountainside and take a look to see the view. Said the boy while taking a seat. Please eat, we have an hour and a half before we need to get to school. Any other questions? Yes, this time it is his friend Kimberly who asked the question. Why did you take us to your place instead of our homes? There is a good explanation for that. 1. I only knew where one of your girls lived and not the other. Secondly, the police patrolled the streets and I did not want to gain their attention, and lastly, how could I explain to both of your parents of what had happened to Trini have a sprained ankle because the ground slid from under her feet because of the explosion and that your clothes are torn in. A few places which clearly paint that we were present there at the mines, explained the blonde. Through the explanation of his reasoning, Naruto has started eating. The two girls, Trini and Kimberly, both blinks with their eyes and came to the conclusion that he was right. However, it was Kimberly who suddenly smirked like a sly fox. That is a good explanation, but how would you explain to my parents that you took me to your house? Maybe you did unspeakable things to me and Trini, something like losing our innocence, shall we say. Why? Kimberly, you know why, shouts Naruto in shock, his eyes wide and beads of sweat slid down his neck. His friend only giggled, which sounds to the blonde's ear like pure evil, only for someone else to voice out her mind. Trini glanced downwards and tears dripped down her face. You're right, Kim, Naruto has taken away our innocent, I know he did mine. When I woke up this morning earlier, I saw a shadow move through my room. A second later I noticed that the area below was quite cold when the air touched my. Stop right there. Screams Naruto, his chest rising heavy. I did no such things like stealing underwear or groping, or laughter filled the kitchen and the two girls held their side. Who said anything about stealing underwear? All I just said that it was quite cold when I woke up. And the reason is that my blanket had fallen off when I slept. Trini said. I did not know that you were a closet pervert, Naruto. I thought of you more like a gentleman, but I guess I was wrong about you. Naruto pouted and with a red face digged back into his food, ignoring the girls who meanwhile were laughing wholeheartedly. Shikamaru, that lazy ass, was right, girls are troublesome. Muttered the blonde between bites. Swallowing down his food and dapping his lips clean, Naruto turned towards the girls. That was a good prank, I give you that, girls. But let us come back to what had happened last night. Was there something you noticed, something strange, or perhaps something this morning? Trini nervously laughed now, and she didn't notice the yellow crystal on the table has appeared just out of her sight, and it was the young man who noticed the strange happening. I don't understand what you think. She waved absently with her hand, and her thought played back what had happened this morning when she just woke up. The dark-haired young girl groaned when the sunlight flows through the window and travels over the floor and slowly crawled up the bedpost and then hit her in the face. Slowly her eyes fluttered open and a tiring groan left her throat. Huh? Were the first vocabulary word that had left her lips when her eyes took in the unfamiliar ceiling and then the walls, which were baby blue, until her eyes lands on the spare furniture this room had. This is not my room, pushing herself upwards in a seated position which causes the blanket to slid off her body. Trini lowered her sight and she breathed out in relief when her eyes took in that she still is fully clothed and that they are in good condition. Throwing the remaining blanket off her that had pulled over her legs, she then left the bed and she glanced around until her eyes fell on a yellow gold crystal that lay innocently on the nightstand next to her bed. She blinked a few times before she banished the sleep from her mind and darted into the room and towards the only door. She tested out the door handle and noticed that it had no lock and slid the door open. Okay, now I'm sure that this is not my home, especially if doors slid open instead of sweeping open. That begs the question of where I am. She steps out of the room in which she was placed and entered the hallway. It was then that the sounds of voices reach her, one definitely a male which sounds a bit muscular while the other is clearly female, softer. Trini had decided to move towards the voices and hopefully, she can find out where this is. Arriving at the stair, only for her eyes to widen when at the top of the banisters the yellow golden crystal lay innocently, yet again. For a second time, she ignored the crystal and quickly made her way down the stairs and into the kitchen, where she noticed the assortment of breakfast which is all non-America and the two slightly familiar faces. This scene and the strange teleporting crystal made her laugh quietly, but not quite enough when she gained the attention of the young man and girl. Trini's eyes returned from her memories when they gained back their focus. She slowly shook her head and said, "Not that I know of, I mean nothing strange had happened." "Maybe you should glance down at your left hand," said Kimberly. "And if that stone of yesterday appearing out of nowhere is normal, then I don't know what is." The dark-haired girl glanced down at her left hand and like the other girl said, there next to her hand and looking innocent is her stone that she last night obtained. The same stone that she had left on her nightstand and also when she had seen it when reaching the stairs. "This is freakish. I swear, that stone was on my nightstand when I woke up and also when I reached the stairs, it lay there at the top of the stairs." Trini's words flowed like a waterfall from her lips. "And what about yours? Girl, your pink stone has appeared next to your hand too." And she desperately pointed at Kimberly's left hand. Naruto and Kimberly lowered their eyes towards the table and just like Trini's stone, it had appeared next to her hand. "What is this?" said Kimberly, her voice quivered in fear. "Something extraordinary, I think," Naruto voiced out before lifting his eyes up. "Did something else happen beside the stone?" Trini brought her index finger to her chin and tapped it lightly. "I don't think that something strange had happened besides the stone." A smile appeared on her face when her lips curled up. "Maybe these stones are just normal teleporting stones." She picked up her mug only for services to shatter and spill the milk over the table. "Trini!" shouts Kimberly, shock evident in her eyes. However, what none expected in the room was Kimberly shooting through the air and crash against the ceiling before gravity pulled her back. "Kimberly!" This time the shout came from Trini and Naruto calmly sipped from his cup of milk. His eyes closed and used a sage technique by breathing in slowly before releasing the air. "What happened, Kimberly, and how could you jump so high, or how did I break the—" "Oh, I'm so sorry for breaking your dinnerware." "At ease, Trini. You didn't know that the strength you used will cause my dinnerware to break," said Naruto, his voice calm and gentle. The sounds of a chair being pushed backward rang through the kitchen and Naruto appeared just in time under his friend, arms outstretched for Kimberly. "And Kimberly, please be careful. It seems that you girls gained some super strength from these power crystals." Kimberly landed safely in her friend's arms. She tilted her head slightly and her lips curled up into a smile. "How did that happen, Naruto?" the girl asked, confused. "And did you also gain super strength?" Naruto just smiled in return. "I do not know what the crystals have gifted me, however, I know that we must be careful of what we will do now. We are now obviously much stronger than a normal human being, and on another note. We do not know if these gifts will be given to anyone else that touch these power crystals." Born the shinobi and used the crystals as an excuse to hide his own origin if they will ever come into the light. "Do you think that the boys also gained super strength, like us?" said Kimberly and her friend lowered her to the floor, her legs first, so she could come back on her own feet. A second later she stands with Naruto arms now resting on her hips. "Thanks, Naru, you are pretty strong if you could catch me so easily." Naruto's ocean blue eyes sparkled with light. "Anytime, Kimberly, shall we prepare ourselves for school which starts in half an hour?" The activity that followed was a whirlwind in his house. Trini rushed back up and locks herself up in the bathroom to brush her hair and other things, while Kimberly helped Naruto cleaning the table before she took Trini's place. 10 minutes later, Naruto and the girls found themselves in Naruto's green Camaro. Angel's Grove High School, lunch break. The doors swept open and Naruto with his friends, Kimberly and Trini entered the canteen. "Now that we have a break, what did Kim means this morning when she asked if you two had gained super strength? If I remember correctly there were only 5 different crystals." Naruto turns his head slightly and smiled towards Trini. "You're of course correct that we found only 5 stones, which each of you took, and I suspect that those who are in possession of them gained some extraordinary powers. But what if there were more than only 5 of them? Maybe there is a 6th, as we do not know the exact amount of how much there are on this planet. Where did you found yours, and does it looks anything like ours? Said Trini. She joined the other students that were waiting in line to load their plates with food. Kimberly joined her, and she too picked up her own plate. Naruto took me out to my favorite swimming place close to the mines. So, we had some fun until Naruto noticed something shining underwater, and that's how we found his. We are still guessing now if that of him is a normal stone or one like that of ours. Knowing my luck, it would probably like yours, Naruto commented and attempted to fill his plate. As on that exact moment, Jason and Billy suddenly pushed him aside, and they moved like 2 crazy dudes while hissing out in pain. Ouch. Ouch. How comes that those crystals suddenly heat up? Billy hisses out in pain. Quickly the boy put his hand in his jean pockets, and a second later he slammed his hand on the counter, which revealed a sapphire crystal that was glowing. This was soon joined by 3 other crystals, one ruby, yellow and a pink one. It started slowly. The ground started to shake, and the dust came loose and rained down on the students. The shaking increased and people start to lose their balance, and several lay flat under a table for protection. Earthquake. Someone shouts out in the crowd, however, Billy, Jason, Trini and Kimberly's eyes were focused now on the floating crystals, and each quickly swapped their own crystals out of the air. We need to go, now. Jason hissed out and quickly darted out of the canteen. Freaky, just freaky, what just happened? Billy exclaimed, a mask of shock on his face. Turning his head wildly from one direction to another direction in fear, hoping that no one had seen them. However, Billy had forgotten that someone had seen them. Surprisingly, Billy had not noticed that with his new obtained strength that he had pushed the newest student from his place. From the floor, Naruto glares at the boy. His reason wasn't that he was pushed, it was more than all the food he had attempted to place on his plate was now on him. Cranston. I will kick your sorry ass for all the food that has landed on me because of you. Billy's eyes shrunk in fear and lands on the pitiful form of Naruto. The poor boy started to shake from head to foot while shivers spread through his body. Oh my, I'm sorry. Shouts the boy and dashed off after Jason in the hope that he protects him. I will skin him alive, hissed Naruto while wiping away some cake from his face that had left a trail of whipped cream. Slowly, Naruto pushes himself back up to his feet, and it was then that he heard the tinkling laughter of the girls. Yay, laugh it up, you too. Aha, Hinaru, don't be mean. It was an accident and I can now say that you're hot and delicious. Laughed Kimberly. She closes the distance between them and then trails a lone finger down his face and wiped up the whipped cream. Slowly she brought the finger to her lips while watching Naruto's eyes growing. Delicious. His blood boiled, spreading through his body that suddenly was pink-colored. Kimberly. Croaked Naruto while steam poured out of his ears. In the distance, Trini laughed joyfully. Alright, you two, let's go and see where those 2 escaped to. She grinned and held the door open. Angel's Grove Mines. Naruto steps out of his car and the doors slammed shut. His eyes quickly focused on a figure running up the side of the cliff with impossible speed. Isn't that Zack? And I see Billy and Jason. They are chasing him. Trini said, and she points at the other 2 who she had mentioned. The girl leans forward before jogging and slowly burst out in a sprint. Quicker than Naruto had expected, Trini had already reached the slope and climbed it. Kimberly too starts with a jog before bursting out in a sprint. She reaches the slopes and climbs it too. Within 10 seconds she stands on the slope and sees Trini stand in the distance, close to the edge, and she could hear the sounds of running water close by. Stop, you two. What do you think you were doing? Jason turns around and his breath stuck in his throat when his eyes land on his crush. Kimberly, Cranston. Naruto's familiar voice rang through the air. I will skin you alive. Kimberly sees Jason stepping in front of the dark-skinned boy. Do you know how difficult it is to get food out of my clothes? Hey. Leave him alone. Jason shouts and took a step back, however, Billy who stands behind him was pushed closer to the edge. What has Billy ever done to you? Besides pushing me and throwing food on me. Besides that, nothing. His voice sounds now much closer. Let me just do my things, Mr. Hero, after that we will have no more problems. Jason pushed his friend some more away from the closing voice, and Billy let out a whimper that the boy thought that it was a fear for the new student. I say, leave him alone, you bastard. Jaws, Jason. Billy cried out when the boy lost his footing and fell backward. For the quarterback player, he felt Billy's presence leave him and quickly whirled around only to see him fall over the edge. Billy. 4 voices rang through the air, and Kimberly, Trini, Zack, and Jason jumped towards Billy in the hope to rescue him, and they disappeared over the edge just at the moment that Naruto finally arrived. A confused expression on his face. Where is everyone? Muttered Naruto, and in his hands, the shinobi held a whipped cream cake. Great, now I cannot pay him back well, more cake for me. Naruto let himself fall to the ground and crossed his legs. I will join them after I'm done here. Kimberly. The voice of her friend called out to her through the opening of the cave. If you can hear me, give me a sign that you are still alive. In the cave, Kimberly tilted her head up and gasped for air. Water dripped down her face while she floats in the water. She sucked in some air and with a strong voice, Naruto. We are fine. We landed in the water. Turning her head, Kimberly studied the others. And no one is harmed. I don't care about those idiots about how they feel or what their situations are. What I do care about is what they pulled you into. Once I get you out and give you some dry clothes, I take you out to dinner. Her blood rushed towards her face, and Kimberly blushed slightly at how much her friend cared about her. She splashed water on her face to cool down and noticed not the dark looks Jason sends her. Next to her, Trini glared up at the hole above her. And what about me, fish cake? What do you mean? Came the not-so-innocent reply from above, and Trini could swear that she could hear quiet laughter from him. Her eyebrows started to twitch in annoyance, and she glared up towards the light. You exactly know what I bloody meant, fish cake. Did you just shove me in the same category like them? Her voice echoes off the wall, and she angrily pointed at the people that caused her to land wet in the water. Billy interrupted. If I could recall, you all jumped after me. He gulped nervously when a pair of angered dark eyes landed on him. Don't mind me, forget that I ever had said anything. Trini turned her attention back towards the hole above her, and she scowled when hearing his amused voice. I would not dare to do anything like that to you, Trini, you know that. Laughter bounced off the walls of the cave. Maybe if you stop glaring at me like that. Kimberly and the others shared a surprised look when she heard her friend point out the girl's expression, which had turned to one of surprise. I will go out of my way to get you some dry clothes too, take you out with Kimberly and me for a late dinner. So, Spitfire, what do you say? Your boyfriend is pretty quick with adding a girl to his relationship, especially after our rough night, Trini said in a whisper, which made Jason glare intensify at the thought of his crush doing the deed with Naruto. And the morning after there was no catfight, which made me think you were friends. I only know the most beautiful girl of Angel Grove High, and I would like to know the tomboyish girl with the sharp tongue. Trini heard the voice of Kimberly's friend, and she narrowed her eyes at the light above her. Trini Kwan turned her attention towards Kimberly and lifted a brow. You are not dating him. Kimberly's blood rushed towards her cheeks, which blossomed a healthy pink. She sunk a bit underwater to cool herself down, and in lieu of answer, she shook her head. Right, do you then mind if I join you? Another shake which made Trini smirk. Fine, fish cake. Your girlfriend doesn't mind if I join your outings, but you pay for everything. Her voice bounces off of the walls of the cave, and Trini had a Cheshire smile on her face. Fine. Trini's smile only grew, and she could imagine him crying. Just wipe off that Cheshire smile and we are golden. For the second time everyone turned out confused at how the boy could read her expression while not even being present. Good girl, Trini, and Kimberly, stay safe and I will be back soon. Jason's glare melted with the hope that the boy finally left. He wonders if his crush had done the deed now with Naruto, and the ex-quarterback hoped surely not. Yet, he had spotted a faint blush on his crush face, and that alone made him dislike his rival more. Hey, guys, look at us. Looking up once hearing Billy's voice, Jason noticed that everyone in the group had light around them of different colors. Whoa. I'm black. Jason turns his head towards the person who had just shouted. It was Zach, who is surrounded by black light. No. You are not. Again, Jason turns his head, and this time it was a more familiar voice. That of his comrade, Billy, who held an indignant expression while being surrounded by blue light. Yes, I am. This time, he could hear the clear smugness in Zach's voice. Now the former quarterback became curious and wondered which color his crush got. Quickly his eyes searched for Kimberly, and Jason must confess that pink sweeter very good. And out of the corner of his eyes, he noticed Trini bathing in the color of yellow. Zach grinned mischievously and glanced at the others. Anyone knows how deep this cave is? He questioned the others, at which the boy got head shakes. No one knows, here his grin only grew. Let's do something crazy, guys. We blew yesterday a part of the mines and gained strange crystals that gave us superpowers, and now we jumped into a cave. I bet my lunch for tomorrow that we will find something crazy. I think that is not a good idea, guys, Kimberly added her own thoughts of actions. We can better stay at one place until Naruto comes back to get us out. Why is she only thinking about him, the newbie of Angel Grove? Jason thought darkly. She is popular, just like me or I was before the whole prank misadventure. But what makes him so special? He turned his attention towards the girl in front of him, who is surrounded by bright pink light. The star quarterback and the most popular girl should have dated one another. Girls were standing in line to become my girlfriend, with the exception of her, but now she has only eyes for him. Yo mate, Trini and I will already move towards the bottom. Zach was heard in the distance of his mind. As for Jason, all his attention was focused on the girl in front of him, who did not give him any attention. What must I do to get her attention on me? Especially now, with me being a nobody with losing my position in the football team. His thoughts moved. What makes this Naruto so special? The gasp of air cut through his thoughts when Zack and Trini resurfaced. The boy, Zack grinned like a lunatic and his eyes brightened and almost lightened the whole cave if it could give light. Guys. At the bottom of the cave is a barrier that we could move through. It's something I had never seen before, Trini voiced out, unsure if what she had seen was true. Let's check it out. Zack claimed, his enthusiasm was overwhelming. No. Absolutely not. Kimberly shouts out. Don't you think it's strange? A barrier you said is underwater where you can move through. A barrier that keeps water outside while it let you through doesn't call for some cautious approach. Hey you, Jason turned towards Zack who obviously called out to him. Yeah you, Jason is your name right? Here the former quarterback nodded. You look strong, do you think that the two of us can drag the girl towards the bottom? A grin appeared on his face and Scott already moved forward through the water. I knew that you would not let me hang. Stop. Guys don't do this, stop. Stop. Kimberly cried out while moving back from the two boys. Yet that was in vain when they managed to catch her and dragged her through the water and towards the bottom. Before the girl knew it, she was through the barrier and landed with a thud on the ground with the boys landing next to her. You bitches. She shouts in anger when she crawled up to her feet and then kicked both boys against their sensitive spots. This falls under the category of kidnapping. Something like this crazy person, I had expected such an action from him, she pointed with her thumb at Zack, who grinned stupidly despite being in pain while holding his jewels. But not from you. A prank against the school by placing a cow in the gym, fine. Boys will be boys, but forcing a girl to an unknown place is far behind a prank. Besides, do not think that I haven't seen your dark, here she quotes with her fingers. Look you have thrown at either my friend, Naruto, or when I mentioned him. Jason grimaced through the pain that flashed through his family jewels. It seems that she has caught his looks at her, that bastard. Groaning painfully as he pushed himself in an Indian seated position. Yo, you're wrong. Am I wrong? How can I be wrong, Mr. Scott? Kimberly's voice climbed in volume, her hands on her hips. Her eyebrows scrunched together and her eyes flashed dangerously, warning the boy to choose his words carefully. Billy stepped bravely between them, not that he felt brave at all. But at this moment, unlike the others, the young boy had seen something that makes him almost speechless. Guys, seriously, you must see this. What? Kimberly almost growled while keeping her eyes fixed on the boy who lay on the ground. Don't you see that I'm dressing down this idiot, Cranston? I'm serious, Billy spoke in a soft, weak voice and almost folded in when the dark piercing eyes of Kimberly fixed on him. Kimberly narrowed her eyes to mere slits and was planning to retort when her eyes looked past Billy Cranston and took in what the other boy had seen. Because behind Billy is a path carved out of the rock, but there at the ending of the cave a small part of a strange object was visible. No way. Trini stepped forward, standing next to Kimberly and rapidly blinked with her eyes. The sight of what she is seeing was something not from this world. Is that a... Hell yeah, Zack burst out in joy. Dancing like a maniac around the group while rubbing his eyes and pinching himself several times in the cheek. A manic grin spread across his face and before anyone could stop him, Zack rushed off towards the alien object. I told you we would find something. We just found a... Jason, who sighed in relief that Kimberly had stopped shouting at him, could not help to stare in stunning disbelief of what was hidden in the cave in front of them. A spaceship here under Angel's Grove is a spaceship. We'll become famous. The voice of Zack bounced off the walls of the cave, which spurred the others to follow him. Not knowing that this discovery would change their lives and those of others. Especially for Earth. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video, guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story, and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.